Keynes.
Keynes.
Help us a little to understand his influence and what he was talking about in terms of reaction to the so-called full-blown acceptance of the market.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and Keynes did reject that. He
He
wrote
did.
a pamphlet in 1926 called The End of Laissez-Faire, in which he said, this belief that the invisible hand works and we can rely on the market to guide us toward equilibrium, he said, it's false. He says, actually, economists don't even believe it. He blamed political scientists for pushing this idea. That it was really only politicians and political scientists who believed this, and it was an agenda, not good economics. So that was 1926. In 1936, in the depths of the Great Depression, he came out with his great book, The General Theory. And that book is really given credit for developing the field that we call macroeconomics, which is the study of the economy as a whole. And the way I always summarize this for students, Keynes's insight. I mean, when I state it this way, you're going to say, "Oh, that seems too simple. That couldn't be it." He said, "Look, firms only produce. Oh, sorry. Let me start again. Firms only hire the number of workers they think they need to produce the amount of output they think they can sell." Now that seems simple, but it was revolutionary. What this means is that lowering wages is not going to reduce unemployment. So we're sitting in the Great Depression. We have unemployment rate of 25%. And the mainstream economists were calling for wage reductions in order to reduce labor costs. So
Austerity, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And
Okay.
it went beyond that. Andrew Mellon, who was the Treasury Secretary, said, we need to liquidate labor. We need to liquidate everything in the economy, push down wages, push down prices, and then everything will be okay. But Keynes is sitting there looking, and the famous story is he went to Chicago and he saw that wages are falling and the unemployment rate is going up. And Keynes realized, well, of course, that's true. Right. If you lower wages, people's income is lower, their consumption is lower, firms will actually cut employment instead of increasing employment. So then he developed an economic theory to explain this in detail. Why lowering wages is not the answer to unemployment. He created the theory of effective demand. So what we need is sufficient effective demand to increase employment in order to get on the road to full employment and recovery. And there's a role for the government to play in raising effective demand. So this became what we all call Keynesian economics, the idea that the government needs to increase effective demand when you're below full employment. This was accepted by all economists after World War II. It was the dominant view. Now, it's questionable whether very many of the people who adopted that view understood very much of Keynes's book, The General Theory. It is a difficult book to read. Paul Krugman has admitted in his blogs that parts of it he can't understand at all. So I wouldn't say that Keynes's arguments were well understood, but that part of the argument was very well understood, and it was adopted by everyone, even by Milton Friedman after World War II. But gradually over time, we've come back to the views in 1926 that Keynes was arguing against in that pamphlet at the end of Laissez-Faire.